And these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. Each man with his household they came: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher, and all these persons springing from the loins of Jacob were 70 persons. But Joseph was in Egypt, and Joseph died, and all his brothers with him, and all that generation. And the sons of Israel were fruitful, and swarmed, and multiplied, and grew very vast, and the land was filled with them. And a new king arose over Egypt, who knew not Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the people of the sons of Israel is more numerous and vaster than we. Come, let us be shrewd with them, lest they multiply, and then, should war occur, they will actually join our enemies and fight against us and go up from the land." And they set over them forced labor foremen, so as to abuse them with their burdens. And they built store cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses. And as they abused them, so did they multiply, and so did they spread. And they came to loathe the Israelites, and the Egyptians put the Israelites to work at crushing labor, and they made their lives bitter with hard work, with mortar and brick, and every work in the field, all their crushing work that they performed. And the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other named Puah. And he said, "When you deliver the Hebrew women and look on the birth stool, if it is a boy, you shall put him to death. And if it is a girl, she may live." And the midwives feared God, and did not do as the king of Egypt had spoken to them, and they let the children live. And the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why did you do this thing and let the children live?" And the midwives said to Pharaoh, "For not like the Egyptian women or the Hebrew women, for they are hardy. Before the midwife comes to them, they give birth." And God made it go well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very vast. And inasmuch as the midwives feared God, he made households for them. And Pharaoh charged his whole people, saying, "Every boy that is born you shall fling into the Nile, and every girl you shall let live." And a man from the house of Levi went and took a Levite daughter. And the woman conceived and bore a son. And she saw that he was goodly, and she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took a wicker ark for him, and caulked it with resin and pitch, and placed the child in it, and placed it in the reeds by the banks of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to see what would be done to him. And Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the Nile, her maidens walking along the Nile. And she saw the ark amidst the reeds, and sent her slave girl and took it. And she opened it up and saw the child, and looking, it was a lad weeping, and she pitied him and said, "This is one of the children of the Hebrews." And his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and summon a nursing woman from the Hebrews, that she may suckle the child for ye?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the girl went and summoned the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Carry away this child and suckle him for me, and myself will pay you your wages." And the woman took the child and suckled him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became a son to her. And she called his name Moses. "For from the water I drew him out." And it happened at that time that Moses grew up and went out to his brothers and saw their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man of his brothers. And he turned this way and that, and saw that there was no man about. And he struck down the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. And he went out the next day, and look, 2 Hebrew men were brawling. And he said to the one in the wrong, "Why should you strike your fellow?" And he said, "Who set you as a man prince and judge over us? Is it to kill me that you mean, as you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses was afraid, and he thought, "Surely this thing has become known." And Pharaoh heard of this thing, and he sought to kill Moses. And Moses fled from Pharaoh's presence and dwelled in the land of Midian. And he sat down by the well. And the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. And they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them off. And Moses rose and saved them and watered their flock. And they came to rule their father. And he said, "Why have you hurried back today?" And they said, "An Egyptian man rescued us from the hand of the shepherds. And what's more, he even drew water for us and watered the flock." And said he to his daughters, "And where is he? Why did you leave the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses agreed to dwell with the man, and he gave Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses, and she bore a son. And he called his name Gershom, for he said, "A sojourner have I been in a foreign land." And it happened, when a long time had passed, that the king of Egypt died. And the Israelites groaned from the bondage and cried out, and their plea from the bondage went up to God. And Elohim heard their moaning, and Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And Elohim saw the Israelites, and Elohim knew. And Moses was herding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, priest of Midian, and he drove the flock into the wilderness and came to the mountain of Elohim, to Horeb. And the name's messenger appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush, and he saw, and look, the bush was burning with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses thought, "Let me pray, turn aside, that I may see this great sight, why the bush does not burn up." And the name saw that he had turned aside to see, and Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And it said, Come no closer here. Take off your sandals for your feet, for the place you are standing on is holy ground. And it said, I am the God of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon Elohim. And the name said, I indeed have seen the abuse of my people, that is, in Egypt, and its outcry because of its taskmasters. I have heard, for I know its pain, and I have come down to rescue it from the hand of Egypt, and to bring it up from that land to a goodly and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Amorite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. And now look, the outcry of the Israelites has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. And now go, that I may send you to Pharaoh, and bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And Moses said to Elohim, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring out the Israelites from Egypt? And it said, For I will be with you, and this is the sign for you that I myself have sent you. When you bring the people out from Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. And Moses said to Elohim, Look, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, The Elohim of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And Elohim said to Moses, Ayer Asher Ayeh, I will be who I will be. And he said, Thus shall you say to the Israelites, Ayeh has sent me to you. And Elohim said further to Moses, Thus shall you say to the Israelites, The name Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob sent me to you. That is my name forever, and thus am I invoked in all ages. Go and gather the elders of Israel and say to them, The name Elohim of your fathers has appeared to me, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I have surely marked what is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up from the abuse of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Amorite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will heed your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt. And together you shall say to him, The name God of the Hebrews happened upon us. And so let us go pray 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the name our Elohim. And I, on my part, know that the king of Egypt will not let you go, except through a strong hand. And I will send out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I shall do in his midst, and afterward will he send you out. And I will grant this people favor in the eyes of Egypt, and so when you go, you will not go empty-handed, but each woman will ask of her neighbor and of the sojourner in her house ornaments of silver, and ornaments of gold, and robes, and you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, and you shall despoil Egypt. And Moses answered and said, But look, they will not believe me, nor will they heed my voice. For they will say, The name did not appear to you. And the name said to him, What is that in your hand? And he said, A staff. And it said, Fling it to the ground. And he flung it to the ground, and it became a snake, and Moses fled from it. And the name said to Moses, Reach out your hand and grasp its tail. And he reached out his hand and held it, and it became a staff in his grip. So that they will believe that the name Elohim of their fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob, has appeared to you. And the name said further to him, Bring, pray, your hand into your bosom. And he put his hand back into his bosom, and brought it out. And look, his hand was blanked like snow. And it said, Put your hand back into your bosom. And he put his hand back into his bosom, and brought it out. And look, it came back like his own flesh. And so should they not believe you, and should they not heed the voice of the first sign, they will believe the voice of the second sign. And should it be that they do not believe even both these signs, and do not heed your voice, you shall take of the water of the Nile, and pour it on the dry land. And the water that you take from the Nile will become blood on the dry land. And Moses said, Please, the name, no man of words am I, not at any time in the past, nor now, since you have spoken to your servant, for I am heavy-mouthed and heavy-tongued. And the name said to him, Who gave man a mouth? Or who makes him mute, or deaf, or sighted, or blind? Is it not I, the name? And now go, and I myself will be with your mouth, and will instruct you what to say. And he said, Please, the name, send pray by the hand of him you would send. And the wrath of the name flared up against Moses. And it said, Is there not Aaron the Levite, your brother? I know that he can indeed speak. And what's more, look, he is coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, his heart will rejoice. And you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I myself will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will instruct you both what you should do. And he will speak for you to the people, and so he will be a mouth for you, and you will be for him like a god. And this staff you shall take in your hand, with which you will do the signs. And Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law. And he said to him, Let me go pray, and return to my brothers, who are in Egypt, that I may see whether they still live. And Jethro said, Go in peace. And the name said to Moses in Midian, Go, return to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead. And Moses took his wife and his sons, and mounted them on the donkey, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took God's staff in his hand. And the name said to Moses, When you set out to return to Egypt, see all the portents that I have put in your hand, and do them before Pharaoh. But I, on my part, shall toughen his heart, and he will not send the people away. And you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus said the name, My son, my firstborn is Israel. And I said to you, Send off my son, that he may worship me. and you refuse to send him off. And look, I am about to kill your son, your firstborn. And it happened on the way at the night camp that the name encountered him and sought to put him to death. And Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched it to his feet. And she said, Yes, a bridegroom of blood you are to me. And it let him go. Then did she say, a bridegroom of blood, by the circumcising. And the name said to Aaron, Go to the wilderness to meet Moses. And he went and encountered him on the mountain of Elohim, and he kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the name's words with which it sent him, and all the signs with which it charged him. And Moses and Aaron went, and they gathered the elders of the Israelites. And Aaron spoke all the words that the name had spoken to Moses, and he did the signs before the people's eyes. And the people believed and heeded that the name had singled out the Israelites, and that it had seen their abuse, and they did obeisance and bowed down. And afterwards Moses and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, Thus said the name, Elohim of Israel, Send off my people, that they may celebrate to me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is the name, that I should heed its voice to send off Israel? I do not know the name, nor will I send off Israel. And they said, The God of the Hebrews happened upon us. Let us go, pray, a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the name our Elohim, lest he hit us with pestilence or sword. And the king of Egypt said to them, Why, Moses and Aaron, do you disturb the people from its tasks? Go to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, Look, the people of the land are now many, and you would make them cease from their burdens. And Pharaoh on that day charged the people's taskmasters and its overseers, saying, You shall no longer give the people straw to make the bricks as in the time past. They themselves will go and scramble for straw, and the quota of bricks that they were making in the past you shall impose upon them. You shall not deduct from it, for they are idlers. Therefore do they cry out, saying, Let us go sacrifice to our God. Let the work be heavy on the men, and let them do it, and not look to lying words. And the people's taskmasters and its overseers went out and said to the people, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, I give you no straw. As for you, fetch yourself straw wherever you find it, because not a thing is to be deducted from your work. And the people spread out through all the land of Egypt to scramble for stubble for straw. And the taskmasters were urging them, saying, Finish your tasks at the same daily rate as when there was straw. And the overseers of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten, saying, Why have you not completed your tally for making bricks as in time past, neither yesterday nor today? And the Israelite overseers came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, Why should you do this to your servants? Straw is not given to your servants, and bricks, they tell us, make. And look, your servants are beaten, and the fault is your people's. And he said, Idlers, you are idlers. Therefore you say, Let us sacrifice to the name. And now go, work, and no straw will be given to you, but the quota of bricks you will give. And the Israelite overseers saw themselves coming to harm, saying, You shall not deduct from your bricks from the same daily rate. And they encountered Moses and Aaron poised to meet them as they came out from Pharaoh. And they said to them, "Let the name look upon you and judge, for you have made us repugnant in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, putting a sword in their hand to kill us." And Moses went back to the name and said, "My Lord, why have you done harm to this people? Why have you sent me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done harm to this people, and you surely have not rescued your people." And the name said to Moses, "Now will you see what I shall do to Pharaoh, for through a strong hand will he send them off, and through a strong hand will he drive them from his land." And Elohim spoke to Moses and said to him, "I am the name.